Tired of the hype about living the dream? It's time for truth. This is the place for tools, power, and real talk so you can create the life you dream and deserve. Your ultimate life. Subscribe, share, create. You have infinite power.
Hello and welcome to Your Ultimate Life, this podcast dedicated to help you create the life of purpose, prosperity, and joy that you can create, and do it with your gifts, your talents, your life experience, the things that are near and dear to your heart. Today I have a special guest, Ankush Jain. Do you say Jane or Hain?
It's Jen is the correct way to say it. Yeah.
Ankush Jain. Okay, Ankush Jain. With a name like Kellan Fluckiger, you pay attention to all that sort of stuff. So, all right. Well, anyway, I've known Ankush for many years, I guess now, at least 7 or 8 when we first met. But anyway, Ankush, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Kellan. Thank you for having me.
I'm stoked. So, a question that I love starting with, because it opens up so many field of possibilities, is you've made a committed decision to do certain things in your life. And I want you to tell the listeners, how does Ankush add good to the world? And I don't want you to be modest. It isn't what this is about. It's just like, how do you add good to the world?
You know, it's such a great question, and I think it's a great question for us all to reflect on. Because so my coach is a guy called Steve Hardison. Some people may know of him. He's known as the ultimate coach, and he often recommends books. He's a voracious leader and reader, I should say. And he recommended a book recently called The Butterfly Effect, and it's a small book. You can read it in about 20 minutes, half an hour, and it's brilliant because it talks about the ripple effects of the decisions that we make in the world and how they can span centuries. You know, anything that happens, if you follow it back far enough, it's like there's so many things that have had to happen for that thing to happen. And I've been saying for years that the impact we make is far greater than any of us realize, whether it's positive or negative. We will never truly know the impact we have on the world. And so how do I do good? There's a lot of ways that people who know me might associate that. So professionally, I'm on mission, and I have a vision of raising the consciousness of the planet. That's something I've been speaking out into the world over the last year. And when I first said it, I had no idea what that would look like. And a year on, it doesn't seem as ridiculous as some people might have thought a year ago. And there's been so much movement in that direction. A big part of that happening is me transforming the coaching profession, which I'm doing by talking on shows like this. It's going to be through my upcoming book, and there will be more books. It's through speaking engagements, and a real fundamental vehicle of that is my coaching school, which I run in London. I run it once a year. It's over 3 weekends. And I'm helping people rise up themselves to a level of what I call a level of leadership, which is creating global impact in that school. It's kind of gone far beyond what the initial vision was for the school. So I can talk about all of that. And I think what's just as important is my role as a father. And this is not some trite thing that I say like, oh, right, here he goes, just some life coach talking about this stuff. I really mean that, because I have no idea the impact I have and what that's going to be beyond my lifetime. I mean, I can guess. And it might be that the most important job that I do is the way that I raise up my son to have a healthy and high self-esteem, so that he goes on to be, a world leader, or, whatever, having a huge impact. Or he's healthy enough, and my grandkids, if I ever have grandkids, go on to do something. So it's really, in the micro and in the macro.
I love
So I
that.
don't know if that
And
answers your question.
yeah, it's an answer. And there are a whole bunch of ways you could have answered it. And I know some of the ways we could have talked about. And we'll just start there. I couldn't agree more that the most important thing any of us is ever going to do is in our families, how we treat our partners and how we take care of our kids or don't. The things we help them understand about how the world works, the universe works, or the lack of that understanding will go on. That's the thing that's going to have obviously generational impact. And the folks in your school or in your other programs may also go do generational impact as well. So that's a fabulous place. And I love that. And I love the speaking and I love the writing and the truth of our choice to make an impact. And when you say raise the consciousness of the planet, what is that?
I recently got asked that too, and it's funny because I've been speaking these words for a year, and no one had ever asked me until about a week ago. And I said, I can give you an answer, and the truth is, I don't really know, and I don't
Make up
need
some
to
stuff.
know because,
Like, what do you think it
well,
might be?
let me answer it this way. I don't need to know because I didn't actually speak those words. They were spoken through me.
Mhm.
So I'll give you the background of this. I was running my coaching school last year. I'm on the first weekend, and I got 36 coaches in the room who've all paid, thousands of pounds to be in the room. And the whole premise of the school was to help them grow their coaching practice, be able to enroll clients, make money, and do it in an ethical way and sustainable way. That's what the whole premise was.
Right.
So that's what people are signing up for. And I stand at the front of the room, and my colleague, he says, "So how are you going to start the day?" And I go, "Let's find out." Because I don't have this whole planned thing that I'm going to talk about. And I stand up and I start talking, but it's not the ego, it's not me, it's not the little me. Something came through, and I start saying, "Hey, we're not here to make you a better coach, and you'll be a better coach at the end of the school. We're not here to help you make more money, and you'll make more money by the end of the school." And this is kind of strange because that was the actual premise of the school. I would never have planned to say this. I said, we are here to raise the consciousness of the planet through transforming the coaching profession to one that is as respected as any other, including being a top surgeon or a top lawyer or CEO. And I spoke a little bit more and I sat down and I kind of said to myself, where the fuck did that come from? Because it wasn't from me. And I thought this could go in 100 different directions. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to go wherever this is going to take me. And I just like, all I need to do is take the next step. And so that's all I'm doing. And things are being revealed to me. And the way that I see it now is that we all, like Steve Chandler would talk about the ladder of consciousness, which is a lovely way to talk about it, which he took from the philosopher Colin Wilson. And basically what he says is at the bottom you've got death, right? And just
Right.
above that you've got like depression or whatever. And at the top of the ladder, the highest level of consciousness is like spirit, right?
Mhm.
Like in one with the divine, whatever. And so for me, it's like when we look at in the world's problems today, in my mind, they aren't problems at the level of the problem. They're a problem at the level of consciousness. So if we take that Steve Chandler ladder, for example, and if there was like a default level for the entire planet, if we could turn that up a notch, I think that would have a profound effect on humanity. So what that actually looks like, I don't know, but I'm committed to helping other people. And the way it's coming out now is I'm seeing, just like my coach has seen in me, uh, something just far beyond what I saw. So my coach calls me MG, and I was a little bit embarrassed about it first because it stood for Mahatma Gandhi, and I was like, man, that's a pretty big title to put on, someone of Indian descent. And then we changed it. I said, well, if you're really going to keep saying this, because he kept saying it, I was like, let's change it to modern Gandhi. So he calls me MG. No one was seeing me like that. It took me like months before I even like could accept the title or the acknowledgement, if you like. And that was like last year. And as I started seeing that that could even be possible that someone might refer to me in that way, I started seeing that in everyone. And so the way that I see that the planet's consciousness rises is that as I wake people up to that in themselves, their version of it, that there's all these people out there that even if I was hit by a bus tomorrow, they carry on that path and they're going to change the planet in greater or lesser degree.
So 100%. I couldn't agree more. And the titles referring to powerful or notable figures or the divine or other things is not only true and powerful, but it's also a call to every person who has the essence, the sense in them that there is something there and available, and then they put it down and ignore it and push it away, like we all do, because that's what we're taught practically from the cradle, to not do that, to be less than, to be judged or allowed to be judged and everything else. And your coach doing that for you, saying, no, I see this differently. And you took X amount of time to, what if that's true? What if it's possible? What would happen if? And then to reflect that as a mirror to others. What if you? And then to call upon yourself to say, wow, I see what that's doing for me. So I'm seeing that in everybody else. And that allowance in yourself drove you, invites you to treat truthfully. Now, this is really important what I'm sensing is this is not some made up stuff. This is a true way of seeing something that's already there, but acknowledging and allowing it to be visible and to be spoken.
Absolutely.
Cool. So there's no doubt in my mind that you right here, right now, have the ability to raise the consciousness of the planet. And the ladder of consciousness I'm familiar with, and I love it. Death on the bottom and whatever, infinity on the top, spirit, and all the things in between, all the different things. And if you think of them as rungs, one of the things I teach when I help coaches learn to coach is I say, look, no matter where you are, one of the most important goals of every interaction is to leave that person one rung up the ladder from where you found him. Period. Whatever else happens in the conversation, leave them a rung up the ladder when they leave the conversation, and maybe more or whatever. But that's another way to think of that sort of thing that I talk about with folks. So that's fabulous. And now you've got this school. You mentioned a bit ago that the school at this point has gone, you said, far beyond your initial vision. I want you to talk about two things. Tell me a little bit what that means, initial vision, far beyond. And then I want you, more importantly, to talk about how does that happen and why is that the thrust of all of our collective work in this personal development stuff, the ability of people to sort of see and create far beyond the keyhole vision to start with.
So we met Kellan through Steve Chandler many years ago, and we both attended his ACS school, the
Right.
Advanced Client System school that he ran in America. And Steve has been my coach, or he was my coach from 2014 until early last year. And I love that man. He's had such a massive impact on my life. And I learned so much from him about coaching and the profession and the business of coaching. And even though he doesn't like to admit it, he was a brilliant coach at helping me be a better coach. Even though he would admit that he helps coaches be better coaches, he talks more about the business of coaching. And very early on in my work with him, I started complaining about like how what he was sharing was not more well known, not more widely known, and most of the content, most of the advice for coaches was either uh, not useful or harmful. And he challenged me back in 2015. He said, "Why don't you coach coaches?" And I was like, "I'm not going to do that. That's not proper coaching." Or I don't know. I had some judgment on it. And he said, "Well, can you help coaches?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, do they want help? I said, yeah. He goes, what's your problem? And my jaw dropped. And I realized, okay, you got me there, coach. And I started in a modest way in 2015 with a Facebook group and just creating content for coaches. And then in 2016, we did an event for coaches together in London. And that was crazy for me that, 2 years earlier, it was a guy I looked up to, and I literally looked up to him on a stage as the first time I met him. And 2 years later, we were planning our first event for coaches. And then we did something in 2017, an online program, and then in 2018 we did this kind of hybrid program. And then we got into COVID, a couple of years later.
Right.
But after 2018, I think 2019, I think Steve first floated it because he knew he was coming up to retirement. I mean, at the date of recording, he literally turned 80 yesterday. So he certainly earned it. Um, but he knew that he wanted to pass on his legacy, I think, and he had helped a wonderful colleague of ours, Carolyn Freya Jones, set up a school in
Right.
America. And he said, well, there's also a lot of demand for this stuff in Europe. Would you like to do it? And I thought one day in the future, maybe I'll get to it. And then kind of COVID came along, so that put a pause on things. And then when that was, starting to die down, then we really started talking about it again. And I flew out to Michigan. I spent a day and a half with him, and we created the school in a small conference room with the door open just in case I had contracted COVID and you know didn't want to pass it on to an elderly man. I don't think I'd be the most popular person in the world if I did that. Um, and so yeah, so the initial premise of the school was to do what Steve had done for coaches, which was to help them with the business of coaching
Mhm.
and create a school for that. And so that's what I did. In the first year, it went really well. I mean, I was expecting, to have a few hiccups and teething issues and, with anything and slowly build it up. But the first year really exceeded all of my expectations. But it was still very much around, helping coaches, build a business. But even by the end of the first school, it started to evolve, and I'm like, this could start really having a much bigger impact rather than me playing small and be like, this is my little kind of corner of the world and my little corner of this massive coaching market. I'm just going to do my own little thing and do it well. I started to think, man, this could change the profession because
Mhm.
I'd told Steve for years, like, why isn't this more well known, And the Prosperous Coach book has been out for a long time, and it's very sold very, very well, tens of thousands of copies. And I still see that most people don't really understand the direction that Steve Chandler was pointing in. And even I'd worked with him for 8.5 years. And for a lot of that time, it was weekly coaching. And there's a depth of understanding, it's not just about the information, it's about really getting it and understanding it to a really deep degree. Um, and so I started to see, well, maybe it's my job. So Steve's kind of done the first thing and he's passed the baton on to me. And so maybe it's on me to have a bigger impact and make this more wider known. And so it started to grow and it coincided. So I'm kind of answering both your questions at the same time. It really coincided with me doing some work with Steve Hardison. So I was getting coached by Chandler, but I went over to Phoenix and had 5 sessions with Steve Hardison.
Mhm.
And that's where we worked on, I call it the deepest change work I've ever done. And we created something called a document. And if you read the book, The Ultimate Coach by Amy Hardison, it's spoken about in there. Steve creates this with every client that he's got. And I was really skeptical. Like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if it aligns with my belief system or something. I thought, "Oh, it sounds like affirmations." But I'd had such a powerful experience with a one-off session with Steve the year earlier that I thought, I'm gonna let me just see how it goes and let me work with this guy. And we started working on my document straight away. And we had to go really deep and look at all of the beliefs I had about myself that weren't serving me. And Steve promised me we'll basically eliminate them all, which I was like, wow, I've never come across anything that can do that. Like that
Right.
sounds good. And that's pretty much what's happened. I mean, I look at some of those beliefs I had 2.5 years ago, and I've got them written down. I can't remember that I used to have them. And like it coincided that I was doing this deep personal change work and dropping all of these limiting beliefs, these ideas that were not working for me, and forgiving them. We went through this deep self-forgiveness process. And at the same time, I'm then running this school, and I'm starting waking up to what's possible for me. And ultimately, that's the power of a coach, Kellen. As you know, um, coaches, I've invested, I don't even know now, but I mean, just in the last few years, I've invested $500,000 in coaching. And it sounds crazy. Like you could buy a house for that. You could buy a nice house for that. Um, and yet what I'm up to in the world, there's no way in hell that I would be doing what I'm doing without coaching. And for me, coaching has just the biggest return on investment, ROI, of anything I've ever done. Like if I took all the money I spent on coaching and put it in the stock market or the highest interest return account or something, it would be nothing compared to who I am in the world, my true wealth, as well as financially. I mean, it's both. And I remember someone asked me, how can you work with Steve Chandler all these years? I mean, he wasn't a cheap coach. How could you afford to work with Steve all these years? And he goes, I know when you hired him, you were making, just a smaller amount of money. I think at one point in the first year I was working with Steve, I was making 35,000-40,000 pounds a year from coaching. And, you know, I don't know what that is, like 50,000-60,000 dollars a year. And he goes, how could you afford to work with him all these years? And I said, well, my income didn't stay static. That would be crazy, right? And my business, my income that I generated was used to pay for my coaching, and it still is. I don't have magic pot of money, but I always see it as the greatest return on anything that I do. So that's what's had this, not just now with the school, but with anything I've done. It's always had me think bigger and step into a bigger role, play a bigger game through coaches and mentors who have had, for I hired my first coach when I was 25. I'm 42 now. So, 27 years I've had coaches. And
You want
before
to be
that,
52, 17
right.
years.
So sorry, 17 years
I'm
I've
just
had coaching.
teasing.
And
I
and
want to, I
five
just,
five
oh,
years
go ahead.
before, no, 7 years before that, or 6 years before that, I got into personal development. So I had books and other stuff that was supporting me.
That's fabulous. And I want to hear the leveraging that you're talking about. So you're going from starting personal development at 19, hiring a coach at 25, barely being able to do it. And people say that all the time. I can't afford it. I can't this, that, and the other. And what they're saying is, I don't believe I will. I don't trust myself. A lot more than they're saying that they don't think the coach is any good, or that the program's any good. I always ask people when they say, well, I hired a coach and it didn't work. And I ask them, well, there's only two reasons. One, you didn't do the work, or two, the coach sucked. Well, the coach really didn't suck. And it's always, someone's willingness to execute and do the things to leverage, like you've just talked about. And your journey, the exponential trajectory of the journey that you've described, means that if you, not if, as you stay on that journey, you will achieve those things. I know that. I see it. You may know, I don't know. My year started October 14th. A month ago, my goal this year is to reach 300 million people, to help them create wealth and impact with their life story, their divine gifts, their experience, and so forth. And I love doing that. And so we share that passion. And I love the description of elevating the consciousness. When a person thinks about personal development, what is that? What is that yearning in us that says, I want to be more, I want to do more? Personal development. Talk a little bit about that.
I don't know, because I can only ever speak for my own experience. The
Well,
the
that's
only
what
thing
I'm
I'm an
asking.
expert on is my own experience. So for me, I lived my teens thinking this was it. Like, I just got a fixed personality, and I just got to do the best with this insecure mind that I had, this overthinking mind, and try and blag my way through life. And it was at 19 that I got introduced to personal development through a friend of mine. And I just started, and it was like real basic pop psychology stuff. And I just started to see, like I can be different. I mean, I used to walk. I lived. I was at university. I lived on campus. We were very close to the kind of city center. You call it downtown. And I used to walk through life like literally staring at my feet. 'Cause that was a physical representation of my low self-esteem. I would just stare at my feet all the time.
Mhm.
And I remember reading this thing, and it went, just make eye contact with people. And to take my eyes from down there to like up there was so scary, but I tested it and I didn't die. And it was from that moment I was hooked. I was like, I can be more. I don't have to accept just my default way of life, the way I'm operating. And so I was just hooked. I mean, that was the only thing I had like it was my main hobby in my 20s was was like developing myself, was growing, was um and really what it was trying to get to a place of being okay with being me because I
Mhm.
didn't really like me deep down.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's practically from the cradle. We're taught to not be okay, not be good enough. Grades and judging and failures and parents and maybe religion and society. It all focuses on what we're not good at or shortcomings and all that. And that choice you made to say, wait a minute, I get to choose a narrative and it doesn't have to be the one that's based on others' opinions.
Mm.
Is that turning point? What so that's spectacular. I want to talk that piece you referred to about a document. I love that, and I've spent the last 10 or 12 years involved in that thing myself. In fact, the last book that I wrote is about that, called Living with Purpose and Power, which your coach, Steve Hardison, wrote the forward to because it was about that. Why is that such an important thing for people to have? I'm going to define it. You can redefine it if you want, some kind of a constitution or an agreement or a declaration of who you are in the universe. Why does that matter?
Well, I often ask people who come to me because I've helped a lot of people create their document over the last couple of years, and I always ask them, how many people do you know that have a document? And they go and they think, well, I can hear them on the phone, and then maybe a couple, or I know one, or maybe a handful. They always come up with a number or an idea, and I always say incorrect. The answer is everyone. See, everyone has a document, and I'm finding different language to try and articulate what this is, and the language I've come across this summer is self-image.
Mhm.
And it just came to me to explain it like that, and that seems to really land with people. Everyone has a self-image. And that seems to make more sense to people. Like, so when I say everyone has a document, I'm saying everyone's got a self-image. And most people's self-image is not very nice. I mean, there might be some nice things in there, but I've worked with people, and I'm not, some people think who don't really know about coaching and what I do, like I'm working like a therapist. I'm working with people who are really kind of downtrodden or got real serious mental health problems. I'm not, I'm a coach. Therapy is normally about healing the past. Coaching is about creating the future. So I'm often working with people who most of other people or their peers would say this person's very successful. And yet I've talked to people who outwardly in the world can be seen, in the top 1% or top 0.1% in the world or their profession or whatever. And if you were able to kind of open their head up and look at their self-image, it wouldn't be too nice. And a lot of people think, oh, I need to be that way in order to keep striving and pushing forward. And you don't. But
No,
that's,
that's a horrible energy to have to be
yeah,
growing from. It's a negative energy. And yeah, negative energy can frighten you and try to get you to do stuff, but it's not very conducive to real growth and happiness. And anyway, you keep going. Positive energy is far more valuable. Go ahead.
yeah. And it's surprising to me how successful, externally successful people can be and still have a real negative self-image. So Steve described it to me like the foundation of a house. And I did some research recently, and the Burj Khalifa, I don't know if it still is, at one point was the tallest building in the
Hmm.
world, and it's half
Hmm.
a mile tall in Dubai.
Hmm.
And they used 100,000 tons of concrete just in the base,
Right.
right? And I say to people, like, if you're going to build the tallest building in the world, you know, the foundation needs to be strong, right? I think it's when all these awards, I'm trying to have a quick Google while we're here around around the thing. I think it's like 50 meters deep or something was the foundation, which is like that's serious, right?
It
Like
is. It's huge.
it's massive. It's humongous. And people like it's the same for us as people, right? That if you want to go out and create in the world, like you want to create a skyscraper in terms of yourself, then you need to have a strong foundation. Otherwise, you it's gonna topple, right?
Well, there's no question about that. Why is it that people have, that's a good visual, self-image is a good description, and it's intuitively obvious you need a strong foundation. Yet I'm sure one of the things you discover is people's either reluctance, resistance, and sometimes inability to tell the truth or to be available at a deep enough level to do the work that actually creates that foundation.
I tip my hat to anyone who and I acknowledge everyone who works for me. I say, look, I acknowledge you because it's really easy to ignore this. Most people do. I do a lot of work with men. I run retreats twice a year for men, and
Hmm.
it's only 12 guys. And every time I do it, I say to them, look, I massive, massive, massive respect to everyone who's here because it would be so easy to not be here. So many excuses. And again, people can be very externally successful in the world. They, they've got let's call it a house. They've got a nice house, right? Let's call that what they're portraying in the world. People call it the highlight reel on social media, but the foundation's got cracks in it, and they just try and cover it up. And they keep trying covering it up. I know people who are rich and extremely poor, and what I mean by that is they have money in the bank, and their relationship with their wife is terrible. They have chronic stress. They are workaholics. They have addictions. And I'm not talking about the odd person. I'm like, this is,
That's the
all
normal.
over the place. It's
It's all
normal.
over the place. It is all over the place because, again, as we're taught from the cradle to believe that we're not good enough for the most part, we're also brainwashed, beat into the idea that what people see on the outside is the most important and the thing that we should and are judged by in terms of our worth and value. And that's completely backwards. So I 100% agree with what you're saying and understand.
Yeah. So not everyone will do this. I can't do this with everyone. And I'm finding more and more people are drawn to this. And I guess if you go back to like psychology 101 and look at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as people go up, we live in a world now, and I mean we almost take this for granted, but you go back 100 years, the world looked really different. The average lifespan was a lot lower, right? Just basic necessities people didn't have. 100 years in the history of mankind isn't that long.
No.
Whereas now, in not just in the West, but in a lot of countries, people can afford to, have, certain decent healthcare and education. And, with the advent of the internet, people got access to information that they never had before. And there's cheap internet all around the world. So things have really changed. And I think what's happening is people are realizing that as those basic needs are met, they want more, and they move up that ladder, if you like.
Yep.
And there's a cost. So one of my favorite books, one of the ones that Steve Chandler recommended to me, was a book called Taking Responsibility by Dr. Nathaniel Branden. It's one of the books that's on my curriculum of my school this year, and I really encourage all of your listeners to read the book. It's brilliant, brilliant book. And in the book, he talks about a Spanish proverb, and he goes, it's his favorite Spanish proverb. And it's now my favorite Spanish proverb because it's the only Spanish proverb I know. And it translates to God said, take what you want and pay for it. And I freaking love that. I love it because it's like you can have whatever you want, but there's a price. You want to have an incredible marriage, there's a price, right? It's a creation. Anything that's you want to have a great body, and I'm building an amazing body in the gym. That's something else that's changed as a result of my document. There's a price to pay. I go into the gym, and there's a literal price to pay because I pay for gym membership and personal training 4 times a week. And there's a price to pay in terms of energy. Like there's a million other things I could be doing, but it takes me. I'm an hour in the gym plus going, then coming back, showering, all the rest of it. There's a lot of my time taken up by that, and I know that's an investment. There's a payoff. So there's certain things that I want. I want to not only live long, I want to be healthy as I get older. And so, right, you want that? Well, you can have that. This is the price. Even with food, like I don't know, at the start of this podcast, I was just quickly finishing eating because I eat a lot now. I mean, it's gone the opposite way. Last year, I massively cut back on my calories and to cut down all the fat off me, and now I'm going the other way. But I'm putting on lean muscle. I I got to struggle to eat everything, but that's the price. That's the
I,
price that I pay.
I love it. There is a price. And I just, so that is completely in alignment with so many episodes that we've talked about. You can have whatever you want. You literally can have whatever you want. You can speak it into existence, but you got to pay the price. You got to walk the path. Wherever you are and wherever you want to go, there's a road. There's always a road between here and there. Are you willing to walk it? That's it. Are you willing to walk the road?
Mm.
Well, we're a little bit over our time, which is fine. And there's 27,000 things that we could talk about and probably people would be valuable. But I want to ask you, is there something burning on the tip of your tongue or exploding out of your heart that you want to share with people about who you are, what you're doing, and an invitation to them to listen to those yearnings that they have to grow?
Mm. This might sound strange, but after everything I've said, let me say this. Don't listen to anything that Kellan and I have to say. The greatest thing, the greatest person anyone can listen to is themselves. And I actually don't mean themselves. I don't mean the ego part of you. I mean, we all have a deeper connection to something, a knowing, an intuition, a guidance. And like you've pointed to in this episode, Kellan, we are taught to kind of ignore that. But again, anyone can build that relationship by listening to the voice and acting on it, and listen to it and act on it. So if you believe the exact opposite of what Kellan and I are saying, and it's you're being guided to that, go and do that. Go and follow that. So if there's anything I want to share with people, it's like you are your own best guidance for anything. And that's true for me and you and anyone. And the more that I follow that guidance, the more it's leading me to do things that, the small Ankush, if Ankush tried to create whatever's been shown up in my world, there's no way. I couldn't do that. And so I believe that's the greatest thing anyone can do.
Thank you. Thank you, because we do these things and we say all kinds of stuff. And like you said, when I ask you a question, you said I can only answer it from my experience. And that's always going to be true. And I want to just agree with what Ankush just said to the listeners. There is a listening to that voice, your higher voice, the one that you know the difference when it's whispering versus the ego. You know that. And there is a price to pay to develop into listening better, hearing more often, and a price to pay to follow. So the choice then is to listen to your voice, pay the price to do what it says, even when it seems weird or hard, and keep moving. Pay that price to create both the relationship with your guidance and the outcomes, because it will lead you up your own mountain. It will lead you to your highest development and greatest joy. So follow that. So thank you. Ankush, thanks for being here with me today.
Thank you, Kellan. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you.
I want to urge you guys to listen to this a couple of times. Ankush has shared a bunch of really good stuff that's important, and it's true. It's not just a couple of dudes talking about things. It is true and true for you. Not what we said, but what you can create for yourself. If you're willing to listen and pay the price, you can have it, build it, and create your ultimate life.
Never hold back and you'll never ask why. Open your heart and this time around.
Right here, right now. Your opportunity for massive growth is right in front of you. Every episode gives you practical tips and practices that will change everything. If you want to know more, go to KellanFluckigerMedia.com. If you want more free tools, go here, YourUltimateLife.ca. Subscribe, share.
Stand with your heart in the sky and your feet